Hey guys, this is Saktoth, and I want to show you this game in order to demonstrate some underused weapons and some uncommon ship designs. So the first of these you'll see coming in right now, it's Thinky's Tesla Destroyer. Now he's been using these for quite a while and he's one of the few people who still uses Tesla Destroyers, but I have one of my own Tesla Destroyer. But what I'm going to do here, since he's using them so effectively, I'm going to retrofit my Tesla Destroyer into a Flame Destroyer. So what is a destroyer? A destroyer is a battery-powered afterburner ship that is meant to get in and just do DPS. It's very similar to a bomber, but they use different suites of weapons. Don't use alpha damage. They often have weapons more range, beams, Tesla, that sort of thing. So they do have very different usage. And you can see here, it stays in range for extended periods of time doing DPS damage. But it's really about dumping a battery as fast as possible. So a lot of people call these Slayers because the only destroyer that really survived the implementation of cloaked bombers was the Godslayer destroyer, which is a hex reload ring arrangement. So people will call a ship like this a Flame Slayer after the Godslayer. This is the perfect environment for it though, because everyone's using these massive battleships and has tons of hit points, and they're also using lots of spinals and stuff and things like artillery that can't shoot at point blank range. I get in there and set everything on fire. I'm doing so much damage to these ships right now, just with a simple, cheap, around $500 flame destroyer. I lose it, but I've done so much damage now. You can see the amount of flame that these ships have, the amount of damage they've taken, and at the same time Thinky came in with his Tesla destroyers, so using destroyers in tandem like that, not only does it distract the enemy's fire and split their fire between the targets, but it also, the Tesla can clean up a lot of fighters, smaller stuff, bombers, do a bit of damage, while the flame really lays on the hurt on the big, heavyweight capital ships. So I've got another flame destroyer coming in now, but you can see Tidio's responded by building these really long range and even speed coiled stacks of missile ships. So this is the first vulnerability of destroyers, is to long range anti-fighter weapons, particularly range like this. They don't really have an answer because they're not cloaked like a bomber is. So they can't operate within the area of long-range anti-fighter weaponry really at all. And you can see I can't even capture any points with this. I just have to run away and leave it up there, basically. So I'm left with taking a bombardment strategy with these long-range shielded orb cruisers. Now, these things are really pretty annoying because they can just sit at max range and just blast out orbs like all day long. Like they outrange pretty much everything. Their DPS is really low. But they have full 360 firing, they can just retreat from almost anything and just keep shooting at it. And versus a very slow composition like TDO uses, and it looks like his allies are... Here I turn on my AI so he can get some auto scouts to capture the stuff around, because obviously we're down to 1 point, so even I sometimes resort to auto scouts. But yeah, against really slow compositions, this is where both orb, due to the long time you have to fire, and flame, due to the long time it has to burn the enemy down and the amount of hit points he has, that's where they really begin to shine. When the enemy is very heavy and takes a long time to close. I'm going to try and make something else happen with another flame destroyer though, because this ship out down the bottom is caught out of position, this artillery ship. If I can get close to it, its artillery can't even fire at me, and I can also take these points. I have a few auto scouts in position. I take one artillery shot to the face, and then I swap in a point defense ship because my flame destroyer is not going to be very useful until we get rid of these missiles. But you can see I've got full flame on that target. He's just going to slowly burn to get death. Then I see that Thinky has brought in his Tesla destroyers. So this is the perfect time for me to come in from the flank to start taking out those missile ships that are causing our destroyers such trouble. But he's got a big swarm of EMP ships here, and I do end up going down a little bit late to join him in the fight. So we have these little EMP fighters coming in, but we have a huge fleet here, more than enough to deal with just a few EMP ships, especially with a Tesla ship there, Tesla destroyer. Meanwhile, we've killed most of their front line. They're bringing in their second wave of ships from the rear, but I can get my orbs into position to take out this artillery ship. I swap in my flame destroyer, of course, because all their missile ships are gone. Don't need the point defense ship. I need the flame destroyers to take out their hit points. But there goes his artillery ship, which means that I can build some autocappers to try and secure some of the territory that we're actually taking. You can see Thinky's going down there with his destroyer to try and capture it, But I have another opportunity with my flame destroyer here because they have nothing in here to defend it. Put a bit of flame on that target, but he's going to go down pretty quickly. I'm really after these artillery ships. The last missile ship there, which is good to take out. But a bit of flame, fair amount of flame on that artillery ship. There goes the frontline ship as well. And the missile ship should go down pretty quickly too. It is currently burning. Yeah, that's the very last missile ship, so they have nothing now to stop our destroyers. We have free reign with our destroyers. Unfortunately, I think he's got one of his destroyers caught. He tried to body block with the other one, but yeah, it's run out of energy, so he doesn't have any carry capacity. Get another destroyer in. You can see my orb ships are just constantly sort of barraging from range. Their DPS is low, but they're really good for finishing off ships after you've hit them with a Flame Slayer, because a lot of shots and they're very easy to hit. Take out this isolated artillery ship with more flame. It hits maximum flame very, very quickly. Let's see if I can get something else done. Need to dodge some of these shots and come in on the side again, because they're using spinals. I can come in on the side, then get underneath the artillery ranges, which means that he can't hit me anymore. But no, unfortunately I do get hit by a stray artillery shot because they are split enough. That's what you do with artillery ships. You split them enough that they can cover each other. You sort of have to do that. But we've got a ton of destroyers coming up from Thinky, up to 3. I'm mostly suiciding my destroyers rather than reusing them because these are cheap ones. These are volumetric, cheap, $500 destroyers. He's got double afterburner ones, so he's quite expensive and reusable. That's why he's got so much carry capacity. And you can see, look at this. It's just like completely burning up this battleship here, coming around from the rear while he's distracted, trying to hunt down those Tesla destroyers. Again, completely burnt to a crisp. Let's see if I can get anything else done with this, but no, that heavy point defense is a pretty good close-in weapon. So now we see the second weakness of destroyers, which is a lot of point defense, close-in weapons, sidearms, and what have you. But now they have their own destroyer, the Godslayer destroyer. This is Hex Reload Ring. This could completely mess up my cruisers, but thank you to the rescue. Here we go. Tesla ship's completely powering it down. Isn't that great? My little Corvette is a little bit late to the party. I probably would have lost the ship there if not for Thinky. He's really on the ball. But they are starting to adapt to the destroyers by building their own destroyers, ring destroyers, and by building corvettes. Bombers are a good answer too. This Corvette comes in, it's just beating on my Corvette, but it has a cute little jump maneuver where it can jump in or jump away. So bombers often jump in to do their damage if they're suicidal, or they can use it to survive, so they come in, do their damage, instantly turn around. Especially with low angle mounts, you can instantly turn and go back the other direction. Bit of a hard maneuver to pull off, but a lot of high level players do it. So I'm building these corvettes in order to intercept enemy corvettes, bombers, Godslayers, things like that. And I can also, of course, clean up these little cloaked carriers, which is nice. But I can use these defensively to make sure that my cruisers don't get taken out. Also to help defend against things like fighter rushes and stuff like that. That's another thing that the autocannon variant is good for. Swapping in the point defense ship again. TDO is coming with big wall of speed artillery. So just to be sure that we don't lose all our ships to it, I am getting some point defense, or considering getting point defense. I have like my 10th slot's like an auxiliary slot. Like I have a bunch of stuff in there, like Tesla destroyers, flame destroyers, beam destroyers, specialist ships, like point defense ships. So I'm often swapping that last slot because it's not sort of a consistent part of my lineup, even though I'm not using most of my lineup right now. So yeah, blowing up his much more expensive Corvette there with my much cheaper one, which is already damaged and already not that high on hit points. So you can try and do that again, see if I can. But did you see that? He jumped. He avoided all of the damage, all of my autocannon fire, by instantly jumping away the moment he fired. That was incredibly neat. Like Corvette versus Corvette wars. Great little bit of micro there. So now I can finally afford my point defense ship. This will, before those artillery really get in range and start pressuring our home point, because we've been trying to capture as much of the map we can, but we've been pressed back to our home point most of the game. We have a lot of stuff stacked up there, though. Great Main in particular has a bunch of ships, bunch of carriers by the look of it mostly, which are really providing a lot of power to Thinky's ship. Swap back in the Flame Destroyer since I have the point defense ship out now, and it looks like they're not really fielding that many more corvettes or anything, so I reckon I can probably get some flame on these big orb battleships. But there are a couple of corvettes in the rear, so that's something I need to worry about. But oh, here come the Tesla destroyers. Look at that, that's like, what is that? 6 of them? So that's a lot of firepower. He's using them a lot like sort of kiters. He's going in, he's recharging them really, really quickly, and then coming back in with them, over and over again. And TDO does that thing to me again where he jumps back and avoids almost all of my fire. It's pretty neat. Here comes Thingy with the Tesla ships again. He really needs to kill all the targets, so mostly it just picks off the weaker targets, but you see the moment he hits the stasis from the Corvette, he slows down so much. You see I try and punch through with a Flame Slayer at the same time, but I hit that stasis and just go down almost instantly. It allows the artillery to hit you as well as being trapped just in the front of the Corvette. So I pulled my orb ships back so I don't get bombarded too much. My point defense ship's almost dead, so it could die pretty quickly if it got focused down by the orbs. Luckily, he's not paying attention except for TDO's Corvette here, but he knows he can't get too close before taking some damage, and he's getting hunted down by these little cloaked orb ring ships here. I think it's out of energy anyway, yeah, so that means that it can't do very much. It's got a bunch of EMP fighters. They're trying to focus down my point defense ship, but its shields are coming back online and there's way too much firepower in the area for him to really get close. Sending in the destroyers again, another flame destroyer, we see an opening, blows up that last Corvette just through Tesla bounce fire and getting tons of flame damage on here, but these ships are almost dead anyway, just because of the amount of bombardment we have at our home point. So they're going to take a lot of flame damage over time. That first few ticks of flame damage is quite high, because flame ticks off a percentage of your current flame damaged hit points, 3% per second or something. So the first few ticks are really high, and as the flame damage gets and the hit point gets lower and lower and lower, it ticks slower and slower and slower and slower. So it's sort of like a percent based damage thing. I'm going to swap in a defensive ship here, just to ensure they can't do anything to force down our home point, because we are on the last point here. We've destroyed most of their front line, sort of ripped it open with all of our bombardment now. Just need to clean this up, but they are getting dangerously close to that last home point. You can see TDO's coming in with a bunch of autocannon ships to try and sort of rush things down. But I think with having destroyed their front line, we have a lot of ships here. And I think he's doing this beautiful thing where this is what you can do with Tesla, is you can bounce off a ship on the front to hit all the ships in the back. This is beautiful against fighters, because you can actually outrange the fighters quite easily, just because you only need to get in range with the first fighter. It's a shame that these destroyers like this and the flame destroyers are so underused, and this is really where these weapons really shine. It's one of the reasons they're underused, because they shine here. You can see he gets within range, takes shots from 2 of the fighters, and then kills all of the fighters. TDO calls GG, and that's game over. So Tesla and Flame are definitely underused. A lot of people think of them as underpowered, and maybe that's sort of true, but they are perfect on destroyers, as you can see in that last match. So why do destroyers die out a bit after the implementation of Cloak? Destroyers, particularly beam destroyers, used to be able to kite bombers. They could go almost as fast, and they would power down the bomber with a perfectly accurate weapon and tons of DPS before the bomber could get into range. With Cloak, they can't do that. The bomber is only revealed when it's on top of you and basically firing. And this is why a Corvette is sometimes not as strong against a destroyer as a cloaked jump bomber would be. Because even though the stasis can be very useful, the destroyer can kite the uncloaked Corvette, but it can't kite a cloaked bomber. So while these can be really effective, even against very high level players like TDO, and this is a 3v3, so there's a bit of stuffing around, but you can see how effective they can be. You can see how much damage that flame can do. Even though they can be very effective, we could definitely probably afford to buff Flame and Tesla in some way. Flame has an enormous damage potential, and Tesla with its arcing can get like insane ranges. It can arc through so many units. They have huge potentials. But in a lot of applications, they just don't see that potential at all. They just don't reach it. So Flame could afford, I think, probably to get a little more base damage so that it can kill pursuing packs of fighters and things like this. Flame used to be insane versus fighters, and we really spec'd it. We really tuned it in to be a percentage damage based anti-heavy weaponry, and you can see it's doing that amazingly, but we've tuned it so high that it's almost useless against fighters now, and I think that limits some of its utility. I think we could bring down that potential enormous damage against battleships while bringing up some of its utility so you can use it in a little more cases, and it's not only in that case that the enemy's using nothing but these incredibly slow, incredibly high hit point battleships. For Tesla, we could just up the stats a little bit, but it threatens to become a stun locking weapon. So Tesla has energy drain, and when we last addressed or balanced Tesla, we had to lower the energy drain a little bit because Goddard in particular was using it in these energy drain compositions, which were just really pretty ridiculous. They could stun lock you, and it's Goddard does things that no other player can do, so he makes bad stuff look good. But stun locking is very unsatisfying for the player, and we don't want to encourage stun lock compositions necessarily. What I want from stun is you take out a high value target, a point defense ship, a shield tank, something like that, or you specifically say use a EMP warhead on a pack of fighters which strands them out in the middle of nowhere, and so the player needs to make decisions. Do I rescue these fighters? Do I cut my losses? Do I try and get a carrier into range? Can I do that? And then you have to react and kill them in time, or just let him put himself out of position. It creates decisions. Whereas stun locking with a weapon which hits every single target, arcs between every single target, it takes decisions away from the player rather than creating this sort of call and response and more interaction. So Tesla might not really be an appropriate place to have EMP damage anyway. Even in the cases where you're not really seeing any effect from the EMP, you're still paying a big energy cost for that EMP. If it didn't have the EMP damage, its energy cost to fire could be much lower, giving a much more efficient energy cost for its DPS, and allowing it to be much more powerful without worrying about it doing stun lock very occasionally. So another thing that might help destroyers is buffing ultralight armor. It is the most underused armor right now because it's really only effective on units that go above 350 meters a second. And on something like a bomber, you probably don't need the extra speed and you just want to make it cheaper, and ultralight armor is quite expensive. For a reusable ship like these destroyers, having more survivability from a slightly buffed, slightly more effective ultralight armor would be a huge benefit. So from this game, you've sort of seen how effective these weapons can be, but their niche is very narrow, and the sort of ships that they're best on are a little bit underused in the meta. So this is why we haven't buffed them, because they're so strong in their niche, but their niche is so small. They would need a more comprehensive change than just a little buff. They need to be sort of rethought a little more radically. So maybe give destroyers a shot, and tell me what you'd like to see changed, and also what you'd like to see preserved in the future with these weapons.